First contact gone wrong. The pristine white halls of the Varaxian research station gleamed under artificial light, their surfaces so thoroughly sterilized they reflected like mirrors. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her containment chamber, separated from her captors by a force field that hummed with quiet intensity. Her dark eyes studied the tall, silver-skinned beings on the other side, their environmental suits making them look more like walking medical equipment than sentient creatures. Specimen appears to be maintaining stable vital signs, one of the Varaxians noted, their melodic voice distorted by their suit's communication system, though its bacterial count remains disturbing. Sarah bit back a sharp retort. After 3 weeks in captivity, she'd grown tired of being referred to as an it. She was a xenobiologist with degrees from MIT and Stanford, not some lab rat. But arguing had gotten her nowhere with these people. Their germophobia went beyond simple caution. It was the foundation of their entire civilization. "I can hear you, you know," she said instead, keeping her voice level. "And I've told you before, humans naturally maintain a healthy microbiome. It's essential for our survival." The lead researcher, whom Sarah had mentally nicknamed Tall Silver, visibly shuddered inside their containment suit. The very concept is repugnant, to willingly harbor billions of microscopic organisms. Yet here I am, healthy and alive. Sarah gestured to herself, just like the other 8 billion humans back on Earth. The mention of Earth caused a ripple of discomfort among the observing Varaxians. They'd been horrified when their long-range scans had first detected human civilization, a planet teeming with what they considered bacterial symbiotes. When Sarah's research vessel had appeared in their space, they'd nearly destroyed it outright. Only the intervention of the younger researcher, Zex 427, had prevented a diplomatic disaster. She could still hear their voice cutting across the command channel. "Wait, this is our chance to understand them, to study them. What if they're not just carriers, but something more?" Now Sarah stood in their quarantine facility, an unwilling but determined ambassador for humanity. She walked to the edge of her containment field, noting how the Varaxians instinctively stepped back. "Look, I understand your concern, but there's so much we could learn from each other if you'd just..." An alarm suddenly blared through the facility, cutting her off. The Varaxians' suits lit up with warning indicators, and Sarah could see genuine fear in their large metallic eyes. "Containment breach in Section 7, a voice announced over the facility's comm system. "Unknown bacterial agent detected. Emergency protocols engaged." The researchers scattered, leaving Sarah alone in her cell. Through the transparent walls, she could see other sections of the facility being sealed off, emergency force fields shimming into existence. Hours passed before anyone returned. When they did, it was Zex 427, their environmental suit showing signs of heavy decontamination procedures. "Something's wrong," they said without preamble. "Very wrong, and we need your help." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "My help? I thought I was just a walking bacterial colony." "You are," Zex 427 replied, their voice tight with stress. "But you're also a scientist, and we've just detected a pathogen that's unlike anything in our database. Our preliminary analysis suggests it's evolving rapidly." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In her years of xenobiological research, she'd learned that the words rapidly evolving pathogen were never good news, regardless of the species involved. "Tell me everything," she said, professional interest overriding her frustration with captivity. As Zex 427 began sharing their data, Sarah's mind was already racing through possibilities. The Varaxians' obsession with sterility might have actually made them more vulnerable. Without regular exposure to various microorganisms, their immune systems would be drastically different from humans. "Your people's immune system," she began slowly, "how does it typically respond to bacterial invasion?" The answer confirmed her fears. The Varaxians had engineered themselves over generations to maintain nearly sterile internal environments. Their immune responses were highly specialized, designed to eliminate any foreign organisms immediately. That's your weakness, Sarah realized. Your immune systems are too specialized. They don't know how to adapt to new threats. And this helps us how? Zex 427 demanded. Sarah smiled grimly. Because humans, we're really good at adapting. Our immune systems have been playing an evolutionary arms race with pathogens for millions of years. And I think, she paused, weighing her next words carefully, I think that might be exactly what you need right now. The Varaxian scientists stared at her through their protective visor, clearly struggling with the implications. Accept help from a creature they considered fundamentally unclean. The very idea went against everything their society believed in. Finally, Zex 427 spoke. I will have to consult with the council. But they hesitated, then added, thank you, for offering. As they turned to leave, Sarah called out, Hey Zex, your people were right about one thing. Humans are dangerous. She waited until they faced her again. We're dangerous because we survive. We adapt. We solve problems. And right now, that's exactly what you need. The force field hummed in the silence that followed, its soft drone underlining the weight of the moment. Either the Varaxians would overcome their prejudice and accept human help, or their sterile civilization might face a threat it was fundamentally unprepared to handle. Sarah returned to her small desk, pulled out her research tablet, the one piece of equipment they'd allowed her to keep after thorough sterilization, and began reviewing everything she knew about comparative immunology. Whether the Varaxians accepted her help or not, she would be ready. She had just started organizing her notes when a new alarm sounded, different from the first. Through her cell's transparent walls, she could see Varaxian medical teams rushing past, their usually orderly movements now hurried and chaotic. Containment protocols in Section 12 have failed, the facility's AI announced. Multiple contamination vectors detected. All personnel proceed to emergency sterilization chambers immediately. Sarah watched the panic unfold, her expression grim. The Varaxians were about to learn a harsh lesson about the double-edged sword of their sterile existence. Sometimes, a little dirt under your fingernails wasn't just natural, it was necessary for survival. She returned to her notes with renewed purpose. When they came back, and they would come back, she would be ready to show them that humanity's primitive relationship with microorganisms might be exactly what would save their civilization. The soft glow of her tablet illuminated her determined expression as she worked through the night, preparing for the moment when prejudice would have to bow to necessity, and the species that the Varaxians saw as walking contaminants would become their best hope for survival. After all, as she told Zex 427, humans were dangerous enough to solve problems that even an advanced civilization couldn't handle alone, and she was about to prove it. Breaking barriers. The Varaxian High Council chamber looked like a cross between an operating theater and a cathedral. 12 silver-skinned council members sat in hermetically sealed pods arranged in a semicircle, their environmental suits gleaming under the harsh sterilization lights. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before them, still confined within a mobile containment field, but now at least she was being heard. 3 more containment sections have failed in the past 12 hours. First speaker Vax 291 announced that a voice carrying the weight of a civilization under siege. 16 of our people are showing symptoms of contamination. Symptoms that our most advanced medical protocols have failed to address, added another council member, their tone bitter. Sarah projected her data onto the chamber's main display. The pathogen is unlike anything in your database because it's not following the rules you used to. It's adapting faster than your sterilization procedures can eliminate it. Impossible, one of the council members scoffed. Our procedures are perfect. That's exactly the problem, Sarah countered. You've created an environment so perfect, so sterile, that any organism that does manage to survive becomes exponentially more dangerous. She gestured to her charts. Look at these mutation rates. The pathogen isn't just surviving your procedures, it's learning from them. A murmur of distress rippled through the council. Zex 427, standing at the chamber's edge, stepped forward. The human's analysis matches our latest findings. The containment breaches are accelerating. First speaker Vax 291 leaned forward in their pod. And you believe your contaminated biology might hold the answer? Sarah suppressed her frustration at the term. Human immunity isn't just about fighting infections, it's about learning from them. Our bodies maintain a complex ecosystem of beneficial microorganisms that help us recognize and adapt to new threats. You propose we deliberately contaminate ourselves. Horror tinged the first speaker's voice. I propose we study how human immune responses might be adapted to work with Voraxian biology, Sarah corrected, but we need to act quickly. This pathogen isn't going to wait while we debate. The council chambers erupted in argument, their melodic language carrying tones of fear and disgust. Sarah watched the back and forth, noting how Zex 427 seemed to be one of the few arguing in favor of her proposal. Finally, first speaker Vax 291 raised a hand for silence. The council will deliberate. Return the human to containment. With respect, Sarah interrupted, your people are dying. While you deliberate, the pathogen evolves. How many more containment breaches are you willing to accept? The first speaker's silver eyes narrowed. You dare? Yes, I dare, Sarah cut in. Because right now, your perfect, sterile civilization is facing an imperfect, adaptive threat. And imperfection, she smiled grimly. That's something humans understand better than anyone. Silence fell over the chamber. Sarah could feel the weight of 12 pairs of metallic eyes studying her, perhaps truly seeing her as something more than a walking contaminant for the first time. Zex 427, the first speaker finally said, you will oversee the humans' research, but, they added as Sarah felt hope rise, it will be conducted under strictest quarantine protocols. One mistake, one breach, and this experiment ends. Hours later, Sarah found herself in a new laboratory, separated from her Voraxian colleagues by multiple containment fields, but finally able to work. Zex 427 proved to be an eager, if cautious, collaborator. Your species deliberately introduces weakened pathogens into your bodies, they asked, watching Sarah analyze human vaccine data. For practice. Vaccination, Sarah corrected. And yes, it's how we train our immune systems to recognize threats before they become dangerous. She pulled up a new display. Look at this. Your people's immune response is incredibly efficient at eliminating known threats, but it has no memory mechanism. Each new infection is like starting from zero. And human immunity retains this memory. Exactly. We don't just fight infections, we learn from them. Sarah highlighted a section of data. That's why I think we might be able to help, not by compromising your sterile protocols, but by teaching your immune systems how to adapt. Their work continued through the night cycle, interrupted periodically by reports of new containment breaches. The pathogen was spreading faster now, jumping between sections of the research station with frightening efficiency. Another medical team has been contaminated, Zex 427 reported grimly. Our isolation protocols are failing. Sarah studied the latest infection patterns, a theory forming in her mind. These aren't random breaches, she realized. The pathogen is following your air recycling systems. It's learning your facility's layout. Impossible. Our filtration systems are perfect. Perfect is your weakness, Sarah interrupted. You've created systems so predictable that anything capable of surviving them can learn to exploit them. She pulled up the station's environmental controls. Look, every sterilization cycle, every filtration pattern, they're all perfectly regular, no variation. Understanding dawned in Zex 427's metallic eyes, like a code that never changes. Exactly. And this pathogen, it's cracking your code. Sarah began typing rapidly. We need to introduce randomness into your systems, varying cycle times, alternating filtration patterns. That would reduce efficiency by at least 17%, Zex 427 protested. Better than 100% failure when your systems completely break down, Sarah countered. She paused, looking directly at her colleague. Sometimes, Zex, survival means accepting a little chaos. The Varaxian scientists stood silent for a long moment, that inner conflict visible even through their environmental suit. Finally, they moved to another console. Show me what changes you propose. As they worked to modify the station's environmental systems, Sarah felt a subtle shift in their relationship. For the first time, they were truly working together, human adaptability and Varaxian precision finding a balance. There's something else, Sarah said as they finished implementing the changes. Something we need to discuss about the final solution. What do you mean? Sarah took a deep breath. To create an effective treatment, we're going to need more than just data. We're going to need, she paused, knowing how they would react, live samples of human immune cells. The silence that followed was deafening. She could see Zex 427 processing the implications. To treat their people, they would have to deliberately introduce human biological material into their sterile world. The Council will never agree, they finally said. Then we need to give them no choice, Sarah replied firmly. Because without this step, everything else we're doing is just buying time. The facility's lights flickered, another containment system struggling against the evolving threat. Sarah watched her colleague's face, seeing the moment when necessity overcame cultural revulsion. Tell me what you need, Zex 427 said. Sarah nodded, pulling up new research protocols on her display. The real work and the real challenge to Varaxian beliefs was about to begin. The human solution. The emergency alarms had become a constant background noise in the Varaxian research station. Sarah Chen barely noticed them anymore as she hunched over her workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing cellular interactions between human immune responses and the evolving pathogen. Containment breach in Section 23, the station's AI announced, its calm voice at odds with the chaos spreading through the facility. Medical teams report 4 new cases of contamination. They're not responding to the modified environmental controls, Zex 427 observed, their voice tight with worry. The pathogen is adapting faster than predicted. Sarah nodded grimly, manipulating a 3D model of the organism's structure. It's learning. Every failed attempt to eliminate it just makes it stronger. She highlighted a particular sequence. Look at this. It's incorporating elements of your sterilization protocols into its own defense mechanisms. A commotion outside their lab drew their attention. Through the transparent barriers, they could see a group of Varaxian officials approaching, led by Council member Vex 819, one of the most vocal opponents of Sarah's research. This experiment ends now, Vex 819 announced as they entered, their environmental suit adorned with the markings of the Conservative Coalition. We have received reports of unauthorized human biological materials being used in this facility. Sarah stepped forward, but Zex 427 moved to intercept the officials first. The research was approved by first speaker Vax 291, they stated firmly. The first speaker exceeded their authority, Vex 819 countered. Our laws are clear. No contaminated materials may be introduced into our systems. The risk is too great. The risk. Sarah couldn't contain herself any longer. Your people are dying. The pathogen has already spread to 3 other research stations. How many more deaths will it take before you realize your perfect systems aren't enough? Better to lose some than to compromise everything we are, Vex 819 declared. Guards, shut down this lab. Destroy all samples. Wait, Sarah called out as the guards moved forward. She pulled up new data on the main display. Look at these results. The human immune cells aren't just fighting the pathogen, they're teaching your cells how to fight it too. The display showed a time-lapse of the interaction, human white blood cells encountering the pathogen, adapting to it, and then somehow transferring that adaptation to Voraxian cells nearby. Impossible, Vex 819 breathed, despite themselves stepping closer to study the data. Not impossible, Sarah pressed her advantage. Your people's obsession with sterility has left you vulnerable, but it's also given you something unique. Your cells are incredibly receptive to new information. They're like blank slates, ready to learn. Zex 427 moved to another console, bringing up additional data. The human cells are acting as teachers, showing our cells how to develop adaptive immunity without compromising our basic biology. Before Vex 819 could respond, another alarm blared, different from the others, more urgent. Emergency protocol initiated, the AI announced. Critical containment failure detected in Central Medical. Station-wide contamination imminent. The news hit like a physical blow. Central Medical was the heart of the station's healthcare system. If it fell, how long? Vex 819 demanded. At current progression rates, complete station infection within 6 hours, Sarah answered, already pulling up new simulations. But our treatment prototype might be ready in 4. Might be. Vex 819's voice dripped with scorn. It's better odds and certain death, Zex 427 pointed out quietly. A tense silence fell over the lab, broken only by the continuing alarms. Sarah could see the conflict in Vex 819's posture, generations of cultural programming warring with immediate survival needs. Finally, the council member spoke. You have 4 hours. After that, we implement emergency separation protocols and detach the infected sections of the station, condemning everyone inside them to death, Sarah finished, her voice hard. If necessary, yes. Vex 819 turned to leave, then paused. Do not make me regret this decision, human. As the officials departed, Sarah and Zex 427 threw themselves back into their work with renewed urgency. The prototype treatment was showing promise, but it needed refinement. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they could make things worse instead of better. The cellular integration is still unstable, Zex 427 noted, studying their latest test results. The transfer of immunity fails in 23% of cases. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. They've been working for nearly 20 straight hours. We need to strengthen the communication pathway between the human and Voraxian cells. She pulled up the genetic sequences they were working with. What if we? She trailed off, staring at the data. Something was there, right at the edge of her understanding. The Voraxians' sterile biology, their cells' receptivity to new information, the pathogen's adaptive capabilities. That's it, she whispered, then louder, that's it. We've been thinking about this all wrong. We don't need to teach your cells to fight like human cells. We need to use your cells' natural ability to absorb and process new information. Her fingers flew over the controls as she explained. Look, your people's obsession with sterility hasn't just made you vulnerable, it's made you incredibly adaptable. Your cells are perfectly designed to accept and incorporate new information. We just need to give them the right information in the right way. Zex 427 leaned in, their metallic eyes widening as they followed Sarah's logic. You're suggesting we use the pathogen's own adaptive mechanisms against it. Exactly. We create a modified version of your sterilization protocols, but instead of trying to eliminate the pathogen, we teach your cells how to adapt to it. Turn your greatest weakness into your greatest strength. They worked frantically, racing against the clock. Outside their lab, the situation continued to deteriorate. More sections of the station reported contamination. Medical teams were becoming overwhelmed. 3 hours and 45 minutes later, Sarah held up a vial of silvery liquid, their prototype treatment, ready for testing. It has to work, she said softly, because we're out of time. Just then, the station's AI made another announcement. Warning: critical systems failure in Central Medical. Emergency separation protocols initiating in 15 minutes. Sarah looked at Zex 427, seeing her own determination reflected in their metallic eyes. Everything they'd worked for came down to this moment. "Call the medical teams," she said. "It's time to find out if humanity's contaminated biology can save your people." As emergency teams rushed to their lab, Sarah felt the weight of two civilizations' futures resting on the contents of that single vial. The next few minutes would determine whether the Varaxians' perfect, sterile world could learn to embrace a little human imperfection, or whether their pursuit of purity would be their undoing. Crisis point. Emergency separation protocols initiating in 10 minutes. The countdown echoed through the Varaxian research station as Sarah Chen and Zex 427 rushed their prototype treatment to Central Medical. The once pristine corridors now showed signs of chaos. Emergency containment fields flickered unstably, and the usually immaculate surfaces bore visible signs of hasty decontamination attempts. "Treatment delivery team, hold position," a harsh voice commanded. Council member Vex 819 stood blocking their path, flanked by security personnel in enhanced containment suits. "This ends now." Sarah clutched the case containing their precious vials. "We don't have time for this. People are dying." "Better a quick death than the corruption of everything we are," Vex 819 declared. "Security, seize the contaminated materials." But before the guards could move, another voice rang out. "Stand down." First speaker Vax 291 emerged from a side corridor, their environmental suit showing signs of recent decontamination. "The treatment proceeds." "You exceed your authority," Vex 819 protested. "The Conservative Coalition will not condemn our people to death out of fear." Vax 291 cut them off. "I've just come from Central Medical. I've seen," they paused, their voice wavering. "I've seen what this pathogen does. We have no choice." A medical alert blared through the station. Warning: multiple organ failures reported in Containment Ward 7. Medical teams unable to maintain stabilization protocols. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Every minute we waste arguing is another life lost. Your perfect world is already compromised. The question now is whether you're willing to adapt to survive." "Listen to her," Zex 427 added, their normally reserved voice carrying unexpected authority. "I've worked with this human, studied her. Yes, she carries what we've always feared, but she also carries something we desperately need: the ability to change, to adapt, to become stronger through imperfection." Vex 819 wavered visibly, looking between the first speaker and the security team. Finally, they stepped aside. "The consequences of this fall on your heads." They rushed to Central Medical, where dozens of Varaxians lay in isolated containment pods, their silver skin mottled with dark patches where the pathogen had taken hold. Dr. Marek 654, the chief medical officer, met them at the entrance. 5 more critical cases in the last hour, they reported briskly. Standard treatments showing zero effect. Organ systems are simply shutting down. Sarah quickly set up their equipment, her hands steady despite the pressure. "We'll need to start with the most critical cases first. The treatment needs living tissue to work with. It can't help those who've already..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew they'd already lost too many. "This is the moment of truth," she said, preparing the first dose. "Who's first?" "I am," a weak voice called out. They turned to see a young Varaxian scientist struggling to sit up in their containment pod. Sarah recognized them, one of Zex 427's research assistants who'd been infected early in the outbreak. The next few minutes were tense as they administered the treatment. Sarah watched the monitors carefully, acutely aware of every eye in the room fixed on her and the dying Varaxian. "Cellular response detected," ZEX 427 announced, studying the real-time data. The human immune templates are, yes, the patient's cells are accepting the adaptive protocols. For several minutes, nothing seemed to change. Then, gradually, the dark patches on the patient's skin began to fade. Their breathing eased. The medical monitors showed strengthening vital signs. "It's working," Dr. Marek 654 breathed, their professional detachment cracking. "The infection is actually retreating." They moved quickly to treat the other critical patients, working with practiced efficiency. Each successful treatment built their confidence, but Sarah knew they weren't out of danger yet. Emergency separation protocols suspended, the station AI announced. However, containment breaches now detected in 47% of station sections. The pathogen is still spreading. VEX 819 observed grimly from the doorway, having followed them to observe. "But now we can fight it," Sarah countered, preparing more doses. "Your people's cells aren't just accepting the treatment, they're learning from it. Each successful case makes the next one more effective." She pulled up the latest data. "Look at this. The adapted immune response is actually improving with each new patient. Your bodies are learning to fight in ways we didn't even program into the treatment." "Impossible," VEX 819 muttered, but there was less conviction in their voice now. "No," ZEX 427 corrected, "evolution. Life finding a way to survive, just as it always has. We thought our perfect sterility made us strong, but it made us rigid, unchanging. This human showed us another way." A commotion at the door interrupted them. More infected Voraxians were arriving, helped by their colleagues. The word had spread, there was hope. "We're going to need more treatment doses," Sarah said, already calculating. "A lot more." "The primary synthesis lab is still operational," Dr. Marek 654 offered. "If we can transfer the production protocols." They were interrupted by a violent shudder that ran through the station. Warning lights flashed red. "Critical structural stress detected in sections 15 through 18, the AI announced. Integrity failing." The pathogen, ZEX 427 realized. It's not just infecting people, it's eating through the station's bioengineered support systems. Sarah's mind raced. They had a treatment that worked, but no time to mass-produce it through normal channels. She looked at the recovered patients, then at her datapad, an idea forming. "Their blood," she said suddenly. "The recovered patient's blood already contains the adapted immune response, if we can quickly process it. Use contaminated blood." VEX 819 sounded horrified. "Deliberately spread it through our systems." "To save your entire station?" Sarah challenged. "Yes. Sometimes survival means embracing what you fear most." Another shudder ran through the station. They were running out of time. First speaker VAX 291 stepped forward. "Do it. Whatever it takes to save our people." As medical teams rushed to implement Sarah's desperate plan, she caught ZEX 427's eye. They nodded slightly, both knowing that whatever happened next, the Voraxian civilization would never be the same. The perfect, sterile world they'd built was about to learn the power of adaptation, one drop of contaminated blood at a time. Redemption. Through Central Medical's observation window, Sarah Chen watched as Voraxian medical teams worked with unprecedented efficiency, their usual fastidious protocols replaced by desperate necessity. Recovery pods hummed with activity as processed blood from healed patients was carefully administered to new cases. Structural integrity in Section 16 stabilizing, the station AI reported. Pathogen activity decreasing in affected systems. "The treatment isn't just saving people," Sarah observed, studying the latest data. "The adapted immune response is spreading through your bioengineered architecture, teaching it to fight back just like living tissue." ZEX 427 nodded, their environmental suit showing signs of the endless hours they'd spent working. Our ancestors designed our facilities to be extensions of ourselves. We never imagined that connection could be both weakness and strength. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A group of Voraxian officials rushed in, led by an agitated Vex 819. The Conservative Coalition is demanding immediate cessation of all blood-based treatments, they announced. They're calling it a violation of our most sacred laws. First speaker Vax 291, who hadn't left Central Medical since the treatment began, turned from monitoring a patient's recovery. And what do they propose instead? Shall we watch our people die to preserve our precious purity? You don't understand. Vex 819's voice carried genuine fear. There's already talk of rebellion. The outer colonies are threatening to cut all contact with the station, claiming we're compromised beyond salvation. Sarah stepped forward. Show them this, she said, pulling up comprehensive data displays. Look at the recovery rates. Look at how your people's biology isn't just surviving this change, it's thriving. The displays told a compelling story. Each treated patient showed not just recovery from the pathogen, but enhanced immune responses to other potential threats. Their bodies were learning, adapting, becoming stronger. It goes against everything we believe, Vex 819 protested, but their voice held a note of uncertainty. Maybe it's time to believe in something new, a weak voice called out. They turned to see the young researcher, the first successful treatment case, sitting up in their recovery pod. The Voraxian's silver skin gleamed with health, showing no trace of the pathogen's dark marks. I feel different, they continued. Stronger, like I can finally see clearly. Dr. Marek 654 rushed over with scanning equipment. Impossible. Their immune system is showing completely new structures. It's as if they've evolved, Sarah finished. Your bodies aren't just fighting the pathogen, they're learning how to fight everything better. You're becoming what you were always meant to be, a species that can adapt and thrive. A deep rumble shook the station, but this time it wasn't from structural damage. Throughout Central Medical, recovered patients were standing, removing their isolation equipment. Their silver skin seemed to shimmer with a new vitality. The treatment, it's changing us, Zex 427 realized, studying their own readings. Not corrupting us, as we feared, but awakening something dormant in our biology. Sarah nodded excitedly. Your ancestors engineered themselves for perfect sterility, but they couldn't completely eliminate your species' natural ability to adapt. That capability just went dormant, waiting for the right moment to reawaken. And it took a human to show us the way. First speaker Vax 291 mused. They turned to Vex 819. Tell the coalition this. We are not losing our identity. We are rediscovering it. Our pursuit of perfection nearly became our extinction. Perhaps it's time to embrace a different kind of perfection. But Vex 819 wasn't listening. They were staring at their own hands, where the environmental suit's sensor readings showed unmistakable changes beginning in their own biology. Just proximity to the treated patients was causing their cells to wake up, to remember how to adapt. It's spreading, they whispered, through the entire station, through all of us. Not spreading, Sarah corrected gently. Evolving, just like humanity did, over millions of years. But you're doing it in a controlled, directed way. The best of both worlds, your precision and our adaptability. The next hours were a blur of activity. As more patients recovered, they joined the medical teams, their first-hand experience with the transformation making them ideal helpers for new cases. The station's bioengineered systems, enhanced by the adaptive treatment, began repairing themselves. But not everyone embraced the change. Reports came in of conservative factions barricading themselves in sealed sections of the station, refusing all contact. Others demanded to be evacuated, preferring exile to what they saw as contamination. Let them go, first speaker Vax 291 declared. They will see. Change cannot be stopped, it can only be guided. Late in the station's night cycle, Sarah stood with ZEX 427 in their lab, watching the latest data stream in. The treatment had spread to over 80% of the station's population, with a 100% survival rate among the infected. "You know what this means," she said quietly. "Your people can never go back to the way things were." "Would we want to?" ZEX 427 replied. They had removed their environmental suit hours ago, their silver skin adapting to its first direct contact with the station's air in their entire life. "We thought we were protecting ourselves with all our barriers and protocols. Instead, we were imprisoning ourselves in a sterile cage of our own making." Sarah smiled. "Sometimes the strongest walls are the ones we build in our minds." Speaking of walls, ZEX 427 said, turning to face her directly, "The Council has a request. We need you to stay. Help us understand this new path we're on. Your perspective, your humanity, it's exactly what we need to guide us through this transformation." Before Sarah could respond, a priority alert flashed across their screens. The outer colonies were calling. Word of the station's transformation had spread, along with data about the recovered patient's enhanced capabilities. They weren't calling to cut contact. They were calling to request the treatment. "Well," Sarah said, reading the messages flooding in, "looks like humanity's contaminated biology is about to become your civilization's most valuable export." ZEX 427 laughed, a sound Sarah had never heard from a Voraxian before. "Perhaps that's the greatest lesson in all of this. True strength doesn't come from shutting out the universe. It comes from learning to thrive within it, imperfections and all." As they stood together, watching their data displays light up with requests from across Voraxian space, Sarah felt a profound sense of satisfaction. She had come here as an unwilling captive, seen as little more than a walking contaminant. Now she stood as a bridge between two civilizations, proof that sometimes the best solutions come from embracing what we fear most. The station hummed with new life around them, its perfectly sterile walls now teeming with the possibility of change. And somewhere in the vastness of space, conservation colonies maintained their isolation, clinging to the old ways, living proof that the hardest adaptations are often the ones we refuse to make.